Well, I'm just going to dig in and get going. The instructions seem very well organized. The boxes are labeled for which parts I need for which specific chapter. So I'm just going to start building. I got some time-lapse video rolling with the GoPro. So the narration will come in and out as we see what happens here. And just check out the time-lapse. Here we go. So this was a good idea. Notice that everything that's needed for the Y-axis assembly for Chapter 2 is actually labeled with Chapter 2 Y-axis. So I have a Y-axis baggie here. I have a 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1 there. That's everything. That's number 3 Y or X-axis. That's Z-axis, 5, 6, spool holder. So it looks like I got all the number 2s out of that box. I got my tools set up out of this box. There's a number 2 Y-axis, 3X, 4Z, 5E, 7, 9, 6. There's a box with a 2, 3, 4, and 5 on it. So the idea is I have everything right here on the table that I need for the Chapter 2 and the Y-axis. So the instructions say after this is tightened, when all this is put together, to put it on a flat surface, and I'm assuming that the desk surface here is pretty flat, and to push down on it and check whether the corners are lifting up or not, and I do. You can hear that. I do have one set of corners is not lifting up. The other set of corners is lifting up. So I get to loosen the screws and retighten them. Looks like that got it. Now I'll try to tighten them carefully and see what I get. So I have a preliminary tighten on all of these screws. I'm going to go ahead and crank them down a little bit tighter. Hopefully to spec. The spec says 40 inch-pounds. It's fairly easy to do with one of these Allen wrenches, so I'm just going to guess. Now we'll check again. Looks like we got it nice and flat on all feet. The parts are printed wonderfully and accurately so far. Everything's lining up just right. Pretty exciting. I'm going to mount a motor. Apparently these bearings have to go in a specific orientation. One of the linear bearing tracks has to be in line with the cutout for the bearing itself for all 3 bearings. They are kind of hard to see, actually. So I just had to swap out two M3 nylon nuts out of these holes because I didn't notice in the instructions that it doesn't necessarily say nylon for those holes. But it does say that these U-bolts that hold the bearings, the linear bearings on, those do need nylon lock nuts, and I had run out of the nylon ones because I used too many of them where they weren't supposed to be. So I have fixed it, and now I'm back in business. Very nice, nice and smooth, feels nice and straight. Everything's locked in, it's nice and tight. Got the motor on the back, the stepper motor. Everything looks to line up. The pulley, the belt holder, and the stepper motor, drive gear. Very nice. Welcome to day 2 of the Prusa build. We got our Y-axis, carriers in place, bearings, guide rods. We got some time lapse rolling. We're going to continue build this baby up. So right now I'm trying to tighten the belt. I've just inserted the Y-axis drive belt and I'm trying to tighten it to spec, but it seems the instructions don't really give a spec except that it should take some force to push down on the belt, and you can tighten it up back here on this idler pulley, and I'm assuming that that kind of force is just fine. I don't know, it flexes pretty good, but it's not super easy, it's not floppy, so I guess we'll move on. Might have been nice to have some kind of pound rating on that, 1 pound, half a pound. I don't know, but it's a little bit sketchy, to say the least. Well, the pliers was their double check. So I used the pliers, held the pulley still, tried to move the Y carriage with not too much force, and it didn't move, the belt didn't skip teeth. I'm giving it a thumbs up for now. Let's move on. Apparently, that's the last of this chapter. The Y-axis is done. Great job. Open a bag with the gummy bears and treat yourself with a few. I'm not going to eat the gummy bears because I've moved them somewhere else, but I could if I wanted to. Chapter 3, X-axis assembly. This should be fun. Here we go. There's a bag leg labeled X-axis. There's my X-axis motor. Probably can't see that. It says X-axis right on it. The motors are the same. The difference is the length of wires, so they're labeled so that you get them in the right place. Still looking for a bag of goodies with some linear bearings in it. Haven't found it yet. All right, let's get started with Chapter 3, X-axis assembly. Back to the time lapse. So I got these X ends with the rods inserted with the bearings on them. I'm actually very impressed with how stiff this is, how rigid this is. All I've done is push those rods, those guide rods in to these printed pieces on the ends, and it's already feeling really, really stable. That's pretty nice. Just had to dip into my spare parts bag as I seem to be one M3 by 18 millimeter screw short. I'm not sure why. I did double check back through the steps and saw that I have used them everywhere it said to for Chapter 3, so maybe it's just an oversight in the instructions, or I mean in the packing. Not a big deal because the Prusa was smart enough to include a small bag of extra parts, extra screws and whatnot. So I'm back in business without skipping a beat. That's interesting. I had to dip into the spare parts bag again for this X-axis. Apparently this baggie of screws and nuts that I got wasn't complete. Instructions are asking for 5 of the little square nuts, and there were only 4 in the bag, and none have gone anywhere. So it's kind of interesting that so far I've been really liking everything, and I've been really impressed with how well it's put together, but the little baggies of parts, if there are parts missing, screws and nuts missing, that it just serves to confuse your customers a little bit. So yeah, that should be pretty precise. So far in this X-axis one, it doesn't seem to be that precise. Once again, I'm pretty impressed with printing on these orange Prusa parts. They are exceedingly accurate. They are amazingly specific. Any little tiny slot that's supposed to trap an M3 nut traps it perfectly, and holds it nice and tight. Very impressed with the way these are printed. I would really like to try someday printing parts like this, but this is just really, really well done. So I'm trying to align the belt properly, and I'm not really sure. I mean, it looks good. I'm not really sure what I'm looking for, though. It just says that both the upper part of the belt and the lower part of the belt should be right above each other, parallel. But I mean, they feel and they look pretty good, so I'm not really sure what it's asking me to do, but for whatever it is, I think I got it done. Alright, Z-axis is done. X and Y is done. Well, it's time to build on the extruder. Hopefully the instructions are just as good for this as they've been for everything else. And let's see what we got. So I'm trying to align the drive pulleys. There's one drive pulley and then there's an idler pulley, but I'm not sure. Everything's so dark. Plastic's all black. Looks like I got it though. The idler pulley is the one that doesn't move. The drive pulley is on a shaft that it can move back and forth quite a bit actually. So I'm gonna lock it down. That looks better and feels better. From every angle I look at it, they look aligned. The filament likes it. So I got it locked down. I did have one of these little square nuts fall out of the nut holder. So I'll put that back in, close that up so it won't fall out again, and we'll see what's next. All right, hot and in. Well, this particular screw on this part cooling fan will not, the 18 millimeter long screw will not go through far enough to reach the nut that's embedded in the plastic. And so I dug into my personal set and I found an M3 by 20. Give me 2 more millimeters and it locks in perfectly. That's interesting. It's not tightening down, which means it's probably pulling that nut in a little bit. So maybe I can pull out the 20 and now replace it with the original 18 like it's supposed to be and get it to catch. Perfect. There we go, just needed that to be pulled in a little bit further and we're good to go. Now we're gonna see if we can attach this extruder head to the carriage. It's gonna be fun. And make sure no wires are pinched. I gotta back up. Apparently I forgot a step. There's a channel that these stepper motor wires go through that I must have missed. It's underneath this side fan. There we go. Now we're back in business. I have the wires started to roll in here, but man, this carriage and this hot end requires a lot of wires. Wrapping the cable bundle, I'd like to keep these as straight as possible. It helps make a nice, neater, evener bundle. And there you have it. Fully wrapped wire bundle with not only a bunch of wires in there, but a 3 millimeter piece of nylon filament for rigidity. A little bit of cleanup, clipped wire ties, leftover plastic bags, make sure I'm not throwing away any hardware, and we are on to the filament sensor cover. Well, that's it for chapter 5. It's almost starting to look like a Prusa now. The E-axis is done. Of course, X, Y, and Z taken care of. Got a nice heavy wire bundle back here. It's ready to go. Maybe some prints. It's probably a good place to stop for tonight. Super excited how this is happening. Can't believe it's coming together this good, this easy. I actually expected this to be a bigger printer, but we'll see. Maybe a large format printer will be my next purchase. I don't know. See you tomorrow. Well, day 3 of the Prusa Mk3 build. Let's see how much we can get done today. There you have it, black wire on the pad labeled ground and red wire on the VCC connector. It's looking pretty good. Got the screws just far enough through the nuts to hit the nylon stop nut part of the nut. Let's move on. Getting ready to mount this heat bed up. I got the cabling all wired up, or all bundled up in the loom and all connected here with the cable clamshell. So, should be good. Well, that completes the power supply installation, and next we are on to the motherboard over here. So these screws that are on, that hold this computer case on the side of this Mark III, I just had to tighten those pretty much blind. So I'm really glad that before I slid this case on, because there's just some slots in the plastic, before I slid it on, I actually measured to make sure that the screws were only sticking out as far, just a little shred farther than the plastic was thick. So that when I went ahead and tried to screw it in blind, when I was trying to Allen wrench that in blind, I didn't have too far to go. So that was a pretty smart trick. Did not say that in the instruction book, but that's what I did. It worked out pretty well, even though the screws were incredibly hard to find blind. Time for some cable management. Well, it's time to connect some cables to this motherboard here. I got a bunch of cables routed. There's a bunch of cable management taken care of here. And let's see. The power supply cables go first. Positive, then negative. And my positives are labeled with a red wire. Apparently there are two wires that come off the power supply, but they're both the same. So only polarity really matters. Red, then black, and then red, and then black. Make sure they're tight enough. And then the third pair goes out to the heated bed, and that one is in the same order, first red, then black. Very nice. Red, black, red, black, red, black. It doesn't say to do this in the instructions, but I think I'm going to throw a temporary, at least, zip tie around some of these cables to keep them out of the way and confined. Looks like I've got plenty of zip ties. Thanks for that, Prusa. That'll keep all of those extruder wires coming out and going everywhere. Well, there it is. Completed. Prusa i3 Mark III. I seriously doubt I'm going to be using this double spool holder because I use a shelf spool holder that holds 9 or 10 spools of filament at once. However, I just wanted to add it on there, make sure it fit, make sure everything worked. check out this removable build plate. Nice magnetic. Very nice. Print came right off. Skirt came right off. Her brim. The very first Prusa i3 Mark III print. Next, I need to do the multi-material unit, and then I'll do another video on building that and printing with that, and I will also be doing a video on adding Wi-Fi capabilities to the Prusa i3 Mark III. Stay tuned.